in two different points of view, Olivia, who is the main character, and then Shannon, who is her mother. I don't know if, it's really hard to sum it up because I've done it so many times, I should know this by now. So I'm just going to read the blurb on the back for you. At 4 months old, Olivia Dahl was almost murdered. Driven by haunting visions, her mother became obsessed with the idea that Olivia was a changeling, and the only way to get her real baby back was to make a trade with the dead women living at the bottom of the well. Now Olivia is ready to give birth to a daughter of her own, and for the first time, she hears the women whispering. Everyone tells Olivia she should be happy, she should be glowing, but the birth of her daughter only fills Olivia with dread. As Olivia's body starts giving out, slowly deteriorating as the baby eats and eats and eats, she begins to fear that the thing she gave birth to isn't her daughter at all, and despite her best efforts, history is repeating itself. Soon, images of a black-haired woman plague Olivia's nightmares, drawing her back to the well that almost claimed her life, tying mother and daughter together in a desperate cycle of fear and violence that must be broken if Olivia has any hope of saving her child or herself. So very upbeat. So, like I mentioned, I'm going to read from Olivia's point of view first, and then I'm going to read from Shannon's. I should mark it. Okay. Hours passed like seconds, seconds like hours. Olivia's body twisted inside out, and waves of heat and cold rippled across her skin. She smelled blood and meat. Her mouth watered. She swallowed against the nausea, only for it to come roaring back. Ready? She shook her head, worrying that what would come out if she opened her mouth. It's okay, Liv. It'll be okay. Something inside her ripped, and she felt liquid seep down her legs, soaking the sheet beneath her. She shivered. Get ready, Olivia. We're almost there. The room had taken on a smoky quality. She blinked, and it cleared for a second, long enough that she saw the bloody fabric by her feet, the murky puddle on the floor. Is she supposed to? There's a lot of, it's fluid. A giggle choked the back of her throat. Of course, blood was fluid. No, wrong word. Viscous. Vicious. Viscera. Coppery and unnervingly cold. Up on her elbows now. Olivia didn't have elbows or arms or legs. She was on fire. Here we go, and push. After it was all over, after they whisked the baby away, leaving Olivia spent and sweaty and broken in the middle of the bed, with fresh stitches between her legs, a janitor mopped her fluids up off the floor, while a ring of keys jangled merrily on his hip. Don't worry, he said. I've seen worse. And then Shannon's point of view, this is Olivia's mother. Takes place about 30 years before Olivia's point of view. I never wanted to be a parent. When I was young, most women wouldn't say that, not out loud. Most women were cowards. It wasn't that I didn't like children. I liked them just fine. Helped my mom and aunts raise enough of them. But I didn't want to be stripped down and cracked in half in order to have my own. My mother used to say a woman forgot the pain of childbirth almost immediately. Had to convince her to do it all over again. That's a lie. A woman doesn't forget the feel of a vice squeezing her until she can't breathe. She doesn't forget the way her hips separate and split her in two. She doesn't forget the meaty, irony smell of herself, the hot drip of blood down her thighs, the fire between her legs, the tearing. No, a woman is convinced to do it all over again because some things are worth the pain. I never wanted to be a parent until I saw your face. Those curious eyes, attentive and fixed on me, the curve of your chin, your patchy dark hair and pink lips. It was like I'd made you on my own, with no trace of your father on your body. I knew then that you and I were meant for each other. You would understand me. You would love me. Doesn't mean I don't have regrets. Can't get through life without them. Biggest of them all is having spent most of my life locked away from the world. The way I hear it, though, there's worse places, and I'm inclined to believe it. Joe told me about one hospital they slipped tranquilizers in the milk to keep everyone nice and complacent, and Joe's no bullshitter. I don't mind sharing a room. Joe has her side, I have mine. Joe has her things, I have mine. I get 3 hot meals and snacks in between if it's been a good day, and I have more and more of those lately. Gained a good 10 pounds in the last few months. Joe says they look good on me. It's a strange thing knowing my meals come like clockwork, that I'll eat until I'm not full, but satisfied. Growing up in a house of 8 meant hoarding and scrounging, all of us little mice creeping up into the kitchen in the middle of the night. One time my sister Erin snuck an entire jar of cake icing into the bedroom we shared, and we ate it with our fingers, unable to sleep with the sugar high. Most nights, though, all we wanted were a handful of saltines to bridge the gap. You eat and be grateful. I'm getting hungry just thinking about those days. Feels like I'm always hungry, always trying to fill the empty space where you used to be. Lately, though, I am ravenous. Thank you.
tiny mic trend. This
I
is
know.
the giant mic.
Giant mic trend. No, it's okay. We're good. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me in conversation with you tonight.
Yeah.
This book is gorgeous. It's impeccably plotted and terrified me.
Good.
I don't read a lot of horror, and because I can't sleep, and I definitely was laying awake nights from this one. So
You're welcome.
yes, thank you. Let's start at the beginning. For every book, I mean, every book comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, there's inspiration, and it grows and becomes its own thing. But what inspired this book?
The short answer is the little changelings that walked away somewhere. My 2 children are here. The longer answer is that I read a book called Little Darlings by Melanie Golding, and it was about specifically a changeling story. But I wondered what would happen if the changeling grew up, and what they would become, and what their mentality would be like, and what her relationship with her mother would be like. And it just kind of devolves from there.
Yes. And everyone is familiar with the concept of changelings, right? Okay. All right. So we don't need to go there.
Probably not. If you don't, raise your hand. It's fine.
And so it's a dual point of view. It's and we have 2 timelines. We've got Olivia and we've got Shannon. One of the things that fascinated me as a writer is the point of views that you chose, because Olivia is told in a third-person point of view, and she's in our present timeline.
Yeah.
We're following her in present day, but then we jump back to Shannon, and Shannon, when a past timeline is typically the third person, and Shannon's in the first person. That was fascinating to me. What prompted that choice, or was it just very natural in how they came to you?
It felt natural for Shannon's voice, mostly, but also because I wanted to add to that feeling of kind of displacement. You're used to a story, like you said, happening in the past. It's going to be in third person, so you can feel yourself in that place. But I kind of wanted to contribute to that uneasiness. It feels wrong when you're reading it. So whenever you learn about the horrible things that are happening to Shannon, there's a lot. Then it feels you feel more easily in that space with her.
Right.
I hope.
And the third person point of view with Olivia too, because we meet Olivia obviously during childbirth, and we see her taking care of her daughter Flora, becoming more and more uneasy with Flora and Flora's identity and her own identity as a mother, and it just everything devolves and fractures. And having that third person point of view from her, it just felt like it kept me unbalanced. I wasn't quite sure what she was experiencing, because I was being kept at a distance from her.
Right.
Yeah,
And that was incredibly thank you. That was intentional. It's not often someone will pick up on something you did on purpose, so thanks. Appreciate that. I wanted you to be kept at a distance from Olivia, because it's important for the reader to not necessarily know what's real and what's not along with Olivia. I wanted you to really live in her head, and the only way to do that is to keep you separate from her, which seems a little counterintuitive, but it works that way.
It did beautifully.
Okay.
And what I loved too is how we start the kind of the different subgenres here. We've got psychological horror and we've got paranormal horror, right? And you're never sure which one we're in here. Is this all in Olivia's head? Is it all in Shannon's head? Is it in Olivia's head? And it's just inherited, as a mental health issue, or are there paranormal activities at work here? We're just constantly second guessing and skirting that line. And that was also intentional, right? Or would you categorize this firmly in one or the other subgenre?
I think this book is whatever you want it to be. I don't like the idea of having to put a story into a box, that if it's a horror novel, then it has to have ingredients, ABC. If it's a mystery or thriller, it has to have XYZ. I think that is doing a disservice to stories a lot of times. I like the idea that you could put it really anywhere on the shelf and be happy with it. I wanted to appeal to as many people as possible. So the idea of bringing in those psychological thriller folks, as well as the classic, horror people, I really wanted everyone to enjoy it for what it was.
Yes, it had a very turn of the screw feeling almost in some parts.
Yeah. Look, I've been getting into a lot of Flanagan lately. I feel like everyone has. I'm sure that had quite the influence on that.
Okay, so let's talk about Olivia a little bit. Let's dig into her a little more and her journey into motherhood.
Sure.
I mean, that's right when we meet her. We get a little bit of her backstory, but I mean, we're meeting her in childbirth, and that is her primary identity throughout the whole book. I mean, everything else is taken from her, right? She's on maternity leave. She doesn't have anything else. Tell me about that character and where she came from. Like, how did that character evolve, or did she come fully formed?
Yeah. No, she kind of half and half. This is one of those situations where a character is mildly autobiographical, if only because a lot of my life, well, most of my adult life, I've been a mom. I had my children when I was 19 and 20, so I never really got to be like a grown person that was not a mom. So I've always had a really hard time separating that parental identity from the rest of myself. And so I'm intimately familiar with the ways those personality traits or those labels can tangle. And I really wanted to explore that feeling in a way that I could never articulate to people who, don't necessarily understand that. So that's where she comes from.
Interesting. And Olivia is very socialized in terms of what she feels motherhood should be or should look like, and is feeling that disconnect between this is what it should be, but it's not. I'm not feeling that. It's not happening for me. There's a really hilarious side character that is kind of this perfect mom type with the nice hair and the sundress, and we all want to kill her. And
2 weeks postpartum, and she's glowing.
She's glowing. Yeah, she's living her best life.
Yeah.
We hate her.
Yeah. I should have given her a name so I can be like, that bitch. Whoever she is. I don't know.
But so it's very interesting to me that she has these very almost rigid ideas, that she's socialized into this very rigid way of thinking of what motherhood should be. And is that because she was not raised with a mother, or because she didn't have that mother figure? She had a grandmother, an aunt that was raising her. The absence of that mother is what is making her so desperate to be the perfect seeming mother.
Right, and I kind of came at it from an angle of when we're 5 and someone asks us what we want to be, and we think of our, we get jobs from a picture book. I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to be a veterinarian, because we just have these very, flat images of what these things are supposed to be. And I feel like Olivia's view of what motherhood should be is very picture book. She's supposed to be, just wants to stay at home and be very comfortable and hold the baby all the time, and don't worry, everything's fine, I'll do everything, and I feel great, I don't need sleep. Just that very superficial image of what it means to be a mom, because she didn't have one her whole life. She had her grandmother and her aunt, and both were kind of on the, momming, so she just had to make it up as she went along, and that's what she came up with, and she can't live up to that, and so what is she supposed to do?
Right. And Olivia and Chris's arc is very compelling as well. So Olivia and Chris's marriage seems to start really strong, and as Olivia's questions about her daughter and her state of mind, and she's seen the black-haired woman coming into her life, it's fracturing her marriage as well, because she doesn't want to rely on Chris, or doesn't feel that she can rely on Chris. And
right.
So talk about that marriage arc for a little bit.
Yeah, so Chris is a character that I wanted you to love-hate very much. Where you can see that she wants to help Olivia, but she's got this sort of like weaponized incompetence that she's using, where I'm not the mom, I don't know, I can't feed her, you're breastfeeding, how am I supposed to, I can't do that. Of course I'll stay up with you and immediately falls asleep, or I can't come to your doctor's appointment because I have work, and there's, the leave thing, I can't. She gives this impression of wanting to be helpful, but she has it in her head that she can't, because she's, she's not the mom, never mind that she is also a woman and also a mom, she's not the mom. So that really puts a strain on their marriage, and it just gets worse and worse and worse the more Olivia experiences these like psychosis type symptoms, and Chris is like, you're fucking crazy. But I'm not going to tell you that, I'm just trying to be helpful. And there is one scene in particular that I think really exemplifies that, is the dinner that she, Olivia is struggling with her postpartum journey, and her wife is like, hey, I set up a dinner with friends, and she's like,
let's have strangers into the house. That'll make
she
things
hasn't
better.
showered in
Yeah.
days, let alone eaten. She feels and looks like absolute crap. But yeah, invite people over. Sounds great. Super wonderful. And I'm cooking fabulous. Can't wait. So that happens, and that is when the psychosis really starts to take hold. She's hearing this like screaming sound coming from her child, and that can't possibly be her child screaming, and she accuses Chris of, you know, completely ignoring all of these signs that something horrible is happening. And that's, I think, where the first real break happens for them. No spoilers, there are more.
Yes.
But it does come, you know, sort of full circle in a way.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about the black-haired woman.
Yeah.
Where did she come from? Did you have this image of her the whole time, or did she evolve as the book was evolving?
No, I knew who she was right away because I don't know if any of you have watched The Haunting of Hill House. Do you remember the bent neck lady? Okay. That woman, that image of her lives in my nightmares. She won't go away. So I thought the best way to exercise her is to put her in a fucking book. So it helped kind of.
It didn't work.
But I just had this image of someone she has a familiarity. You can't figure out what it is, and that's what makes her all the more terrifying, is you know you've seen her, you know her, but you can't see her face, and even if you can, it doesn't make the connection. It's like there's this thing tying you to her, and there's no way to get away from it, and it's something you know deep inside you can't get away. But you try, because that's what you do in a horror novel, you try. But it doesn't always work out for the best. So I just had this idea of a creature or a woman who just lives in this place inside of her, and she can't get rid of her no matter how hard she tries.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not just, I don't know if this is spoilery, but Shannon sees her,
Yep.
Olivia sees her, but we get these hints that they may not be the only ones.
Right.
That the black-haired woman is bigger than that.
Right.
And so did you always know that, or did you?
Well, see, that's the thing about an allegory. It has to have its strings in everybody, otherwise it kind of falls apart. And that was purely like from a technical standpoint. It was originally, I really wanted it to just be Olivia's family, but I had already done a curse book. So I was like, maybe I was do something a little different. So I started writing her into more of the female characters in the book, and it made more sense that way, so I just went with it.
It does, yeah. It just resonates, you know, when you start to see that reflection in more and more women, and you're like, oh,
she's coming for me next.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the idea.
And I told Katrina this before we got started, but I was reading the book and I found a long black hair on my kitchen counter, and it was 100% my daughter's hair, but I was like, checked like the whole upstairs, just to make sure. It was broad daylight, but I couldn't take it. It was too much.
That's funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny now. It wasn't funny then.
Well, it'll be funny later too, so it's alright. It'll be funny longer than it's scary.
And the ending, I also wanted to make sure that we talked about the end, not specifically what happens in the ending, but the ending to this book to me was so perfectly what it had to be, and it is emblematic in a perfect ending for me because it's both surprising and yet inevitable. You know, it can kind of shock you a little bit, but also afterwards you can't imagine the book ending any other way. Do you have endings in your head before you start? Because I also love the ending of They Drown Our Daughters.
No, which has served me well. Mostly drives my editor nuts because I will write the endings that I write always stay the same. I end up changing the rest of the book to fit it.
Okay.
Because once I get to the end, it's you get to that last scene and you write it and you're looking at it and you're reading it over and over again because you just have to make sure it sits right, and then you have a feeling, you know, this is the ending, this is great, and then you go back to edit and you go, oh no, I've done something horrible. So yes, I generally know the ending beforehand just because I have to have a goalpost.
Yeah.
I know where I'm getting and I move through and hope I get to the right spot.
Right. I don't always. I did for my last one though. I knew the last scene of the book. I knew the last 2 lines of the book and the 2 characters who were going to say it. So I knew 2 characters who were going to live, and like that's
the start.
How are we going to get there? You know, that was.
And then you get halfway through and you kill one of them. And you shit.
Oh, okay. All right. Got to bring them back. Yeah.
You can do that. They do that all the time.
In horror, yeah. Not as much in thriller.
Yeah, you're right. Thought I had an example, but I don't.
Right. So what is your process like? I mean, I know everybody usually wants to know how you know the.
How do you write a book?
Yes.
You bleed.
Just bleed onto a page.
Yes, you just bleed forever. I usually go through maybe 5 or 6 good ideas before I get to the one that I'm like, this is the one I'm going to write.
Yeah.
I waste a lot of time writing 15, 20,000 words of a thing, and I get to the middle and I go, this is no, and then put it away, and I waste a lot of time. And then, but I have to do the time wasting because then I figure out the one that I really want to write, and then I just speed through it in about 2.5, 3 months, the first draft, which ends up being in the 90,000 word neighborhood.
Okay.
Something like that. It is always very messy. Characters' names change 3 or 4 times, and I have a hard time figuring out who was who and who did what. But the general signposts tend to remain consistent, only because I know what those are mostly going through. I try really hard to know where it starts, where it changes, the climax, and kind of where it ends.
Right.
And everything else can be messy in between. But as long as those 4 things make sense, then I can muddle through editing the rest of it.
Okay.
So it's a lot of crying and a lot of bourbon, but I get there eventually.
So do you have 15, 20,000 word books that you think you'll go back to?
Absolutely not.
No.
No.
Those ideas.
They're gone. No, they're really horrible. So I have one that I started pretty recently that I shoved away, and it's like a cozy fantasy that I started with women who represented the past, present, and future, and memory, and time and memory fall in love. I was in a really sentimental place, and I wrote some of it, and then I said, no, I'm not that, because I started getting like progressively darker as each chapter went on.
Okay,
I was like,
love that.
Yeah, I was like, I can't do this. This is really bad. I have a blatant ripoff of Twilight somewhere. I don't know where it is, but it's there. So yeah, they're just really bad, and they live in the dark.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, but they get you to where you need to go.
Right.
To write the next book.
Yeah, it's like I don't necessarily know the right answer right away, but I know what the wrong ones are.
Yes.
So just get those out of the way, and then
you can spot those.
Yeah.
So why horror?
I was told to.
Oh.
No, it's so with They Drown Our Daughters, originally it was a mermaid book that I thought was going to be like a dark fantasy type thing. I love fairy tales. I'm obsessed with fairy tales. I did not make the connection that fairy tales are the original horror stories until much too late. So I wrote what would become They Drown Our Daughters. We submitted it to a publisher. They rejected it, as it happens. Almost exactly a year later, that editor contacted my agent and said, I can't stop thinking about this book. What if we made it horror? And I was like, are you going to pay me?
Yeah. Let's
And
talk
they were like,
contracts.
yeah, we'll do that. So they agreed to buy it. I made it horror, and then once I got to the end of the complete plumbing the depths edit to make it into a horror novel, I was like, oh shit, this is what I'm supposed to be writing.
Interesting.
This is actually really great. And then I wrote this book, Graveyard of Lost Children, and the first edit note that I got from my editor was, you chose violence with this one, and I said yes, because you let me off the leash. Now I'm like, oh, I can do really dark stuff? That sounds great. Let's do that.
Let's go there.
Yeah, let's kill more folks.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That the contract came first. You know, the
Yeah.
editor had to say, "Let's come with me into this genre."
Right. Like it's the voice was right. The situation was mostly right. It was just swapping a mermaid for a curse,
Yeah.
and it just kind of fell all into place like that.
That is, I love that.
Which is hilarious to me because I still get reviews for that book. Like, oh, I love this mermaid book. I'm like, what are you doing? It's specifically not a mermaid book anymore. But I guess you just get that vibe from it still. So if you like mermaids, man.
No, but it still has the mermaid. I mean, the mermaid museum is in there, and so there's like
It
the
was just cool.
veneer
I
of
didn't
it,
want to take it out.
and it's cool. And it also it's like our explanation for the curse. You know, it's like what we have to. Oh no, it's a mermaid. It's fine. You know.
Yeah. No, some places it had to stay in, but it was actually a really cool experience, kind of being given permission to write something that I did not think I was qualified for. Because when I think horror novels, I think Stephen King. That's all I thought, and I'm like, well, I'm not that, so
you can't write horror because
right,
you're not Stephen King.
And now it's like someone ripped the blindfold off my eyes. I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm reading so much horror now that I'm like, I would not have pegged this as a horror novel at all, but it is, and it's wonderful.
Right. What are some of your favorite horror authors that you're reading right now?
Okay, so to give some kind of contrasting ones, I really love Rachel Harrison, who does kind of like comedy horror in a way. She has a book called Cackle that is about feminine power. More or less, it's about this witch that lives in this neighborhood, and everyone's really scared of her, but she thinks it's all very silly because she's powerful, yes, of course. And yeah, she would kill you if she wanted to, but she's not going to. That's silly. Why would you think that? That's so awful. And it's a lot, and there's like a little pet spider, and it's just very like heartwarming in a weird way.
It's cozy.
It's very cozy. And then I also really like Paul Tremblay. His most recent one, The Pallbearers Club, is one of those things that kind of punches you in the gut, and you're very upset about it, but you also like, thank you, appreciate you, because it's about vampires, but it's also about grief, and it's about addiction, and it's about trying to muddle through this horrible experience on your own, and you have this one friend, and how you push them away because you think they're a vampire, which is so silly, but also might be. And I love that both of those books can exist in the same genre.
Yes.
That makes me really happy.
And that is, I mean, as someone who's just getting into horror, I love how it always has to exist on those multiple levels.
Yeah.
There's always those layers that you can dig underneath. I mean, there's the jump scare, sure, you know, but there's the psychological aspect of it too. There's the societal commentary always laid underneath, and that's just, it's like a book that keeps on giving.
Yeah, I like a book that you can really like dig into and try and sort out what it all means, or you don't have to. Sometimes you just enjoy the monsters.
Yeah,
which is nice.
Excellent book club book for all your horror book clubs,
or thriller book clubs, or mommy and me clubs,
play dates. Yeah, it's like just tailor made.
Yeah, just be like, look, see, it's not just us.
So I think we were going to do questions with the audience as well.
Yeah.
So does anyone have any questions for Katrina about the book, about writing?
They're like, no, we came here, you talk. Talk, monkey. You're allowed to ask questions. I might pick on something. I was meant to be a teacher. I never became one.
Would you teach English literature or something else?
No, I teach something ridiculous like
Botany.
Sculpture. I can't do it, but can't do teach, right?
But you could grade it.
I could grade it. I could look at it and be like, this is great. Nice job, Johnny. Do you have a question, wife? To get us started?
Hi, I'm Chris. Just kidding.
Why you gotta call me out like that?
She did say that there's a fight in there that has to do with.
Yeah, and the trick is you have to read the book to find it.
I am excited to listen to the audio.
Do you have a question, Changeling?
Okay.
I didn't mean to be offended like that. How long did it take you to write the book?
Too long. Next. It took me, because I was on deadline, probably about 6 months.
Oh, damn.
Wow. That's a really quick book.
You know, once I find it, I'm like in it, and then I come out the other side and I want to die. But it's there. It's done.
So similar to pregnancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, could you just get the book?
Okay, you're cooked.
Yes. Get out. I'm done with you.
Yes.
Yeah, how many books did you, try to sell before you sold one?
A lot. I did not call myself a professional writer until I was actually sending books to people, and that process took me about 10 years and 5 books before I got my agent. Until I got my agent, and then I had to write one more before it would sell. My first one did not sell. That one was what I like to call my vampire Snow White in a circus. But again, I did not know I was a horror writer because I'm stupid.
Do you think that one could do a revision, like a horror revision,
tried
horror
like
makeover?
3 times because I love it so much. It's like I love the circus setting, and then you've got this emotional vampire that's a little bit like, I can't even think of the name of the character, but and then you've got this sister dynamic that's a little bit like Snow White and Rose Red fairy tale, and then you've got the bear, and then there's like a first lesbian love thing in there, and it was just the book of my heart, and everyone said that is trash. So it was not a good day.
But you had an agent with that book.
I got the agent with that book, yes, and it did not.
Yeah,
Nothing.
which is
So it's
common.
just- But it's been that was 6 years ago now, I think, and I'm a completely different writer now than I was then. So I look at it and I'm like,
Yeah,
it was good at the time.
you're telling different stories now.
Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Before you got the deal, did you dabble in other genres? And then now, do you want to dabble in other genres going forward too?
Oh gosh, that's such a loaded question. So the first part, yes, I did. Because when you first start out as a writer, I think everybody does this. You try to emulate the writers you really love to try and find where your voice is. So I tried to be Neil Gaiman for a while. I tried to be Christopher Moore for a while. I tried to be Stephanie Meyer for a while.
You were probably better.
I was like, I didn't even like it that much. I was like, this is what's selling, so let me just write. It was blatant ripoff. It was so bad, I burned it. But
That's what Archive of Our Own is for.
Yes.
You should just put it out there.
No. But I tried a bunch of stuff. Now I keep thinking that I want to try other things, but I think because I'm still trying to get my feet beneath me with horror, that it'll probably be a while before I might try some like straight up thriller stuff, but I always want to throw a ghost in. So I don't know if they'll let me call it a thriller at that point.
Or you could circle back into fairy tales too, which is adjacent.
I could be the next California. You never know. You raised your hand.
Do you think any of your books will ever get banned?
I hope so.
You hope so?
Yes. That means I'm doing it right.
Yes.
Exactly.
I think, are we running low on time? Is that the way?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Okay.
If you want. But.
Yeah.
So usually by the time your book is out, you've got another one planned or nearly.
Yeah.
What's next?
So I actually have one more book coming out for sure with Source Books that is called Through the Midnight Door. And that one I am calling my love song to sisters because it is about 3 sisters who grow up in this town that's based on Gary, Indiana. And they are lured more or less by a neighborhood boy into this really rundown house, and they find doors that should not be there. And the doors give them keys to get inside. Only those 3, and they go through and they see horrible things. Never tell each other what they see, but it changes the path of their lives forever.
Ooh, that sounds great. Do you have a date for that one?
Not yet.
Okay.
I wish I did.
Okay.
Next year-ish.
Interesting that you're moving into sisters because the past 2 have been very strongly mother-daughter books.
Yeah. Well, these were my therapy. I feel like I am healed. So I'm moving into my sisters who make me crazy, but I love them.
Okay. And do you have experience with Gary, Indiana? Were you raised there?
No.
No.
I just felt like I needed a place where you could conceivably walk a block and be like, wow, this is abandoned, so is that one. And, make a playground of it. And that's what came up for me. A lot of Googling.
Through the Midnight Door.
Through the Midnight Door.
Okay, watch for that one.
Yeah, that'll be a good one, I think.
Yeah.
Anything else? Yeah.
Do you have any like horror no-nos or pet peeves that you encounter?
So I'm gonna say this, and it's gonna be ironic. I am not a body horror person. I can't. Okay. So I adore in before I have to go, no, because it's far too much. I say it's ironic because there are some very graphic depictions of childbirth and nursing in here, but to me, that's not body horror because I did it. For someone like you, maybe you would go, ew, which is totally fine and fair. But that is my no-no. I'm not a fan. So.
But you do skirt that, you skirt that line. I mean, we're right up front, page 1, you know? But it's the question of, it's not body horror because it's biology, you know? This is
right,
what
but
we're
I'm
designed to
sure
do.
Eric could make that argument for the way he flays skin from people's bodies. Like, it's biology. You would see it in an anatomy lab, you know? It's, I think that's another thing I really love about horror. It's just, it depends on your perspective.
Right.
That I joke all the time, and don't make me do it now because I'm not drunk enough. But I could make an argument for any book in this store that it's horror.
Yeah.
I'm sure anyone could if you find the right perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a reader for every book here where that book will scare the shit out of them.
Yes. Children's fiction is everything. Children in general.
Berenstain Bears, monsters.
They are.
Yeah.
They hate Goldilocks, I'm sure.
Wish she had a comment.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Breaking and entering.
Right.
Stand your ground. This is devolving quick. I think it's because we all know there's champagne back there. We're waiting for people to stop talking so they will let us drink.
Okay, final questions.
Yes? No? I don't know.
What's the scariest fairy tale to you? Or something?
Scariest fairy tale. The scariest and the saddest is probably The Little Match Girl. I think that is the one that sticks a little needle in the soft places for me.
Agreement in the back there. Yes.
I'm glad we could agree on something. Children, I love you.
Pyramid.
Pyramid. Anything else?
Is there anything that you're too scared to write?
I'll let you know if I get there.
Okay.
Okay. Not yet.
Yeah.
I'm sure I will get to a place where I go, no. Never mind.
It's beyond therapy. Yeah.
It's beyond therapy. Look, if you need therapy, write a book. It helps. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I think that'll call it.
Don't forget to get your signed copy, or 2 or 3 of Graveyard of Lost Children.
Mother's Day is coming up.
Be a great
Great
gift for all kinds of mothers.
All the mothers in your life, they will thank you.
Yes, yes. I'm sure you'll inscribe it with any number of
I'll make it out to your mom.
heartwarming. Yes.
Or to your wife who is a mom. Or your sister. Something. I don't know. Tell me something like weird about them and I'll write it and pretend that I came up with it.
Yeah.
It'll scare the hell out of them.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Yes. Yeah, so don't forget to grab your copies up front. And congratulations.
Thank you.
It's out in the world.
Thank you. And yeah, I brought plenty of champagne, so if you have time to hang out and chat, grab a bookmark, grab a glass of wine, buy a book, have several glasses of wine if that's what it takes. I don't mind. I'm here all night. Thank you, everybody.